Our first guest, more than 20 years experience in supply chain roles of increasing responsibility. He's also worked quite a bit in Mexico. At one point led logistics and purchasing for Nissan in Mexico. And he is now Senior Vice President, Supply Chain Management North America. Very pleased to welcome Chris Stiles to the stage. Thank you, Chris.
Good morning.
Great to have you back. Good morning.
Sure.
Please have a seat.
Here?
Yep, it's right in the end. Yeah, here, sit right in the middle. Our next guest, new to automotive logistics, so very pleased that she could join us. More than 11 years experience in international trade, government relations, currently responsible for institutional affairs and foreign trade for Toyota de Mexico. Very pleased to welcome Lizette Gracida.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Good. Please, so join us here. Why don't you sit there? I will sit on the end here. Yeah, absolutely. So, as mentioned, I'm going to, I left my questions over there, excuse me, so stay right there. We're going to have a panel discussion here, and I'll kick us off, but please take advantage of having our experts here in the room and ask some questions. But I'd like to start with some overview for our audience from each of your companies in terms of the investment and growth that you see in your Mexican operations, your footprints, and what we should expect over the coming years, which will give us a good basis to discuss expansion in your supply chain. I'm going to start with you on that, Chris.
Well, we specifically to Mexico, we did recently announce a several $100 million investment in some of our facilities, mainly in the Aguascalientes area. That's where we've got the majority of our facilities. So to me, it just shows kind of the influence that Mexico will continue to have. And I think other companies are seeing it as well. So we're seeing not only in the Nissan world, but also in the supply base. You know, we're seeing a lot of suppliers really ramp up what they see as the future needs in Mexico as well. So I think all of that shows that there is a high confidence level, very high confidence level, that as you mentioned earlier, that Mexico is core to really what the growth is going to happen here in the region. So.
Fantastic. So, Lizette, from Toyota's point of view.
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. It is an honor for me to be here. And also, let me share with you that this year we are celebrating our 20th anniversary in the country. And I would like to take the opportunity that many of our logistics partners, as well as suppliers, are in the room to thank all of you, the great support and collaboration during all these years. Thank you so much to all.
We can definitely cheers to that.
Thank you. Now, for Toyota, Mexico plays a key role within the regional strategy in North America. And two of out of the 15 plants that we have in the region are in Mexico. One of the plants is in the north part of the country in Baja California, and this plant started operations in 2003. The second one is in Guanajuato, and it just started in 2019. Both plants are currently producing our top seller Tacoma pickup, and jointly they are producing around 300,000 units per year.
Sorry, Lizette, I think that they're having some mic issues there. Sorry about that.
No problem. So jointly they are producing 300,000 units per year, of course with the great support of our team in Mexico that is made up of 4,000 associates. Our investment in the country amounts to $1.4 billion, and of course we are always looking for future growth and investment opportunities in the country. In terms of sales, last year Toyota sold 91,000 vehicles in the country, which allow us to position the company in fourth place and the industry ranking with 9% of market share. So those great results were achieved thanks to the support, of course, of our 95 dealers that we have strategically located across the country. One thing that I would like to share with you and with our audience is Toyota leadership in electrified vehicle sales. Since 2012, we introduced Prius in the market, and during these 10 years we have been able to sold 95,000 hybrid electric vehicles in the country, which has allowed us to save more than 700,000 CO2 emissions to the atmosphere, something that is very important for us and for the carbon neutrality goals that we have set in our company. And these efforts were represented last year in 28% of our sales were made up of hybrid electric vehicles, and these sales represent 60% of all the hybrids sold in the country. Now, talking about our supply chain, we have been working very strong during these 20 years. And of course, suppliers are key for us, and the development of the supply base is fundamental for, of course, supplying our plants in Mexico. But one thing that I would like to highlight is the relevance that the Mexican suppliers have for our operations in the North American region. Last year, the purchases to Mexican suppliers to supply our plants in the US and Canada amount $4 billion. So this is a great opportunity to continue expanding, since the market is going better in the region. So it's going to be also a good thing for the supply base in Mexico. So as I mentioned at the beginning of my participation, Mexico is strategic, and we will continue working with our suppliers, with the whole supply chain to strengthen and to develop and to achieve our commitments and long-term commitments with Mexico and Mexicans. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Lizette. And I think there you see from two major Japanese OEMs the role Mexico is playing and the expansion that has come and is to come. Toyota launching a plant now at least in the middle of or close around the pandemic too, so plenty of challenges we know would have come with that. I want to just, when we look at the growth, to focus, not over-focus, but get a sense of what some of the bottlenecks and challenges are to that growth in the supply chain. Whether they're logistical costs, whether it's in the supply base, whether it's policy. Maybe I'll start with you with that, Chris. Where are some of the key bottlenecks that we need to address to support that growth going forward?
Sure. I mean, obviously, some of the bottlenecks are very similar to the same bottlenecks we're seeing in the U.S. as well. I mean, some of the core bottlenecks are still around driver availability. I think that there's been a big impact on the entire driver situation because of all the production volatility due to semiconductors, and so a lot of that's created a lot of, I think, uncertainty across the driver bases for all the carriers, inbound carriers, outbound carriers. I think some of the port congestions is another bottleneck. We've seen, some areas like Acapulco, for example, where the government came in and basically took control of that port, so we could no longer use that port. So we're having to divert and then figure out ways to find alternatives, but long-term alternatives. And to Lizette's point, it's long-term partnerships that are going to make those alternatives happen. So, those are kind of the underlying, I think, bottlenecks. I mean, infrastructure, things like that have greatly improved, to be honest. I mean, the infrastructure system in Mexico has really improved over the last 10 years or so. But I think it's going to be more around those long-term commitments, reassurances between the customer or the OEM or the supplier and all the logistics providers that it's not, short-term related types of activities we need to address. So.
It's a good point and foundation of partnership to support those investments for that, and it was you addressed as well as that. So what about from your side? And obviously you focus a lot on international trade as well too. So what do you see as some of the bottlenecks to growth?
I fully agree with Chris. I see two big challenges in the Mexican supply chain and one opportunity. The first challenge is infrastructure. And to give an example, in the Pacific Ocean, there are several ports. However, those ports are not developed for receiving automotive operations. There is only one, that is Lázaro Cárdenas, that has this infrastructure. It's a great infrastructure. However, the issue there is that there is only one automotive terminal. So I think that it is of the essence to develop current infrastructure in the ports such as Manzanillo, Mazatlan, Acapulco, where you have operations, I remember, and also to allow and bring more new players to this to the field, because sometimes having just one automotive terminal reduces the ability of the operations and the efficiencies. So if we want to diversify and to be more resilient, it is very important to develop this infrastructure in the country, as well as develop new public docks. And the private sector also has a good opportunity there to create new patios so that we can move our freights to them. Now, the second challenge we see is in terms of security. Most of the OEMs and in general the private sector and the parties that the people that is here can attest it, is that we have been facing several security issues. So if we want to build a resilient, again, supply chain, it's going to be crucial to address this matter. And in the third place, the opportunity that we see is related to the transformation that the industry is facing.
Yeah.
So according to the experts and to the auto leaders, this transformation has not been seen at least in the past 100 years. So Toyota is transforming from an automotive company to a mobility company. And the supply chain needs to also transform in the same sense. So I think that there are big opportunities for all the key players within the value chain to transform, and also for Mexico to create appropriate public policy to create opportunities for foreign direct investment, for development infrastructure, and for strengthening the role that Mexico plays in the global automotive industry. So in summary, I'll say that it is of the essence the adherence to the rule of law to strengthen it. Number two, to develop the current infrastructure and new projects. And number three, the creation of public policy to facilitate the transformation of the whole supply chain are going to be relevant for the development of Mexico.
You outlined the sort of roadmap that we want to help use this event to shape for the industry, because I think everyone is quite aligned on these points, and how we get there is really what we want to go into some detail in this. But I think really perfectly articulated there, Lizette, thank you. You highlighted some areas there to certainly build resilience in the supply chain, which we know has become a core aim, strategic aim for logistics. And Chris, I thought let's look into Nissan's logistics operations a bit more deeply. What's helping you to become more resilient in Mexico?
Well, a big part of it is just the number of years of experience we have in Mexico. I mean, we've been here for over 60 years. First plant that Nissan opened in the world outside of Japan is here in Mexico, in Cuernavaca. So I think the partnerships and really kind of the know-how we've formed over all these years, we benchmark our logistics supply chain performance with all the other Nissan and Alliance entities around the world, and our Mexico performance is always benchmarked. It's always top in pretty much every category. So I'm very proud of the team here, Yvonne's team, that they maintain that high level. Yeah. So obviously the relationships we have with all the providers and really maintaining all those relationships over so many years. I mean, we were just talking about it last night. It's like a family reunion in a way every time we do this, because we've all been working together for so long. And I think that's really what plays into an ability to overcome all the challenges that we've been mentioning. And I agree with Lizette. And it's not even just the challenges that are inside, the borders of Mexico. I mean, the global ocean capacity constraints has an impact on Mexico. We export to 100 countries from here. So we need, outside the country, even the global flows need to come up together a bit more, because all those ship rotations and everything else, it has an impact. So it's obviously a lot of what we focus on with our team here, with our team in the region, with our team in Japan, trying to really figure out what can we do to be a better customer, right? What can we do to support what they need to operate more efficiently? So there's a lot of discussion on what is it else that we need to be doing versus just, here's a car or bring me a part. So.
That's an important message there, and one that we've started to hear a lot more from our OEM colleagues, how to be a better customer to suppliers and logistics partners. I think companies like Nissan and Toyota have had good reputations in this area, but I think really I've seen a big shift towards that way of thinking. As Chris mentioned, we'll hear later today in the final session today, Ivan Davila from Nissan Mexicana, who will share more specifics on some of those innovations. Lizette, when we look to opportunities in Mexico, and you highlighted some interesting ones just previously in terms of the transformation, what's happening. Do you see increased localization of suppliers, for example, as one area that will be important for Toyota, whether because of policy, but also to increase that resilience?
And of course, I think that Mexico has great opportunities to increase localization. And if we take into consideration that our neighbor, the US, is focusing on this piece, and that is creating a specific public policy to regionalize and to bring the supply chains to not only the US but the region, I truly believe that Mexico has these great opportunities. And in this sense, I think that it's going to be relevant to create a holistic public policy that brings these opportunities, and that Mexico remains as an attractive a country to invest and to develop the supply chain. For instance, there is a great piece of public policy in Mexico that it's called the Auto Decree. This public policy was issued 20 years ago and allow that all global automakers came to Mexico, invest in Mexico, increase production, and develop a great supply base. So taking this example of a successful public policy, I think that Mexican government has the opportunity to complement and to continue it, to bring these new opportunities to the country, and to continue positioning our country as a manufacturing hub in the region.
Mm-hmm. Chris, as you said, Nissan's been there 60 years. I'm sure that your supply chains are quite localized in many, many areas. But again, when you look at what we've seen over 2.5 years, not least with semiconductors, but many other bottlenecks, material shortages, the shipping issues you mentioned, has it put even more focus on this, on the localization side, and the role that logistics plays in that?
Yes, I can tell you, we've focused on localization for 12, 15 years.
Yeah.
As far as supply of parts here in Mexico, we have a very high percentage of localization if you look at the vehicles we produce here. But it has taken even a different level of significance, kind of given all the global challenges, all the tariffs, all the constraints, like I mentioned, in moving goods from Asia specifically here to the region. So there's a constant effort on questioning where we're sourcing, why we're sourcing, if it's not here locally, why, and really kind of understanding, are we truly considering all the options to force more of the localization in the US, and then you have USMCA, you've got regional value content, you've got local value content, so all of that is just pushing everyone to need more localization, for sure.
For sure. So you raised USMCA or TMEC, as we should call it here. Lizette, can you give us a sense of, as you work closely on government relations inside and policy, how has this implementation gone as far as Toyota is concerned? Has it been smooth? Has it had some teething problems? Give us a sense of how that's progressing for Toyota.
Of course. So Toyota is committed to the successful implementation of USMCA. Since the agreement was signed in 2010 and entered into force in 2020, we have been working very hard to ensure compliance with the new requirements. And we are confident that our vehicles, Toyota and Lexus, will meet and meet currently the new guidelines. Our philosophy is to produce where we sell and to buy where we produce. And this philosophy has allowed us to expand our presence in North America during the past 60 years. And an example of this is that currently we have more than 500 suppliers developed in the region, and we spend around $38 billion annually in purchases to these suppliers. A key fact that I love to share is that, for instance, 95% of the steel that we use to produce our vehicles in the region is sourced and produced in North America. So this presence and the development of the supply base has allowed us to be in a good condition and ensure compliance with the USMCA.
Chris, when there's always the law of unintended consequences sometimes. Are you, in implementing USMCA, have you had to change aspects of your supply chain and even logistics to help kind of facilitate that?
Yeah, there has been some, obviously, adjustments that we've had to make to comply. Same as what I'm sure what Toyota's doing to make sure that all of our vehicles comply. So we are doing some things in the short term to make sure that we comply, whether it's moving parts from Mexico to the U.S. to final assembly and bring them back or things like that. Those to me are all not going to be the long-term kind of solutions, but it's adjusting in those ways as fast as we can to make sure that that's happening. But to answer your question, yes, it's having an impact.
Yeah. And Lizette, there are, I believe, some conflicts that are being discussed at policy levels, whether it's related to how localization values are calculated, I believe energy policy. There's a number of different areas, certainly beyond automotive as well. How do you see that impacting the Toyota and its supply chain as those issues are dealt with?
So let me go to the energy piece.
Yeah.
So in 2015, Toyota established a environmental challenge, which basically puts a commitment to eliminate our CO2 emissions globally. And this is not only for our vehicles, but within the whole life cycle of the vehicle, which means that CO2 elimination should happen in the supply and manufacturing process, within transportation, of course in the vehicle, but also within the battery recycling process, among others. So to achieve these commitments, it is essential to have access to clean, affordable, and sufficient energy. For instance, to power our plants, we will need to have access to A, self-generate energy, or B, have access to purchase this energy and ensure that it's going to be sufficient in the long term. So in this sense, we believe that it's going to be fundamental, the creation of a public policy that address this matter and that allows not only Toyota, because all the auto industry, the auto sector is committed to these goals. So the availability of clean energies, renewable energies, and its sufficiency is going to be or play a key role in the country.
And would you say at the moment that we're still sort of lacking some of those policies in Mexico to really move that forward in terms of supporting decarbonization and sustainability?
Well, that is where we need to work jointly with the government to ensure that this is going to happen, and that allows Mexico to remain competitive and allows to continue the manufacturing processes and commitments, because in the end, all companies would need to meet the global commitments, and the contribution coming from Mexico, it's going to be a focus point. So there is where we need to work and an issue that needs to be addressed.
Very relevant point, especially with COP27 happening at the same time. These are global goals which will impact Mexico as much as everywhere else. Chris, we've spoken in other events with some efforts Nissan is making to use alternative energy and fuels in various parts of its logistics. Is that something that is more actively now happening in Mexico too?
We are now actually. We're kicking off a pilot program for to pilot some electric trucks with one of our core carrier partners. So I think they're probably the first trucking company in Mexico that's actually gone out and invested in that type of technology. So we're actively launching that now, along with some other items at our facilities. Similar to Lizette's point, we all have a corporate goal of zero emissions in the long run. So all of these small trials now, the expectation is they're going to pay off. Rather quickly. So we're doing it in the US, similar trials, we're doing them in Mexico now too. Yep.
Okay, yeah. So again, I think the importance of sustainability in the Mexican automotive supply chain will be paramount. I wanted to come back to another sort of policy area, one area we've been hearing some potential challenges around, just to get your take. I'll start with you, Chris, the so-called cartaporte requirements. Is this something, can you tell us a little bit about what this means for Nissan? Is that impacting how you plan operations, how you declare things? Is it a bottleneck, or is it a...
I think we got through it. I mean, it wasn't so simply rolled out, I think. But we were able to work through it and work with the carriers and everyone else to get to a point to where it shouldn't be an issue. It's just we had to put some different parameters and protocols and systems in place and things like that. Yeah.
And for Toyota, was that similar, or?
Very similar. Since we knew about the new requirement, we started working, of course, internally, but with our logistics partners and the customs brokers and others. And we feel that we are ready to go when the government determined the date. However, we are a little bit concerned because we see that potentially there will be like some delays in the releases in the ports of exit and entry. So that is something that we would like to better understand how is going to move forward. Because one thing that is important to understand is that there are many parties involved within this process, and we understand and we support the objective of the Mexican government to eliminate the informality within the transportation vendors, and it's good. The thing is that the parties involved within the process may not have the same level of infrastructure and resources to be ready, so that may create a situation of complicated situation. So I think that maybe a way to simplify and to make the process a little bit more flexible could help to mitigate potential risks in the future and to facilitate the entrance or the readiness of all the parties.
Yeah. Okay. So definitely need, to your earlier point, need engagement with government as well to help and support the rollouts of these much more smoothly and effectively. One topic I want to raise with you both, because I think it's a strategic topic in the long run as well, and you alluded to it, is around electrification and what that will mean in Mexico for your operations, what perhaps supply chain and logistics needs to do to prepare. I'm not asking you to reveal future model programs which aren't yet announced or anything like that, but in the long-term horizon, I don't think there's any doubt that it will come and happen in Mexico too, not least to support the North American market. But Chris, starting with you, so what, as a company that is long been building EVs in the US, what are some of the things that in Mexico need to start happening to prepare for electrification to come, in terms of the production and logistics? Yeah.
First of all, infrastructure, right? I mean, it's the same everywhere. You got to have the charging infrastructure on a scale that supports true usage of electric vehicles of any kind of transport you want to talk about. So that's going to have to be kind of the first initiative. I think there's going to have to be some more direct involvement between the companies and the government as well to help figure out solutions to start that. And once that gets going, I think we'll start seeing more and more, kind of like in the US and then Europe and other countries as well. The infrastructure's got to support really what we want to see as a network.
Yeah.
So until that's there, I think it's going to be difficult to really see a high influx of electrification. It's an evolution, right? It's not just turn on the switch. It's going to take time, and it'll get there, but it's going to evolve. So yeah.
Would you add anything to that, Lizette?
No, I fully agree. It's a transition. In Toyota, we are committed to carbon neutrality in our vehicles and in our global operations by 2050. And in the meantime, we will continue reducing CO2 emissions through our full lineup of electrified vehicles that is made up of hybrid electric, plug-in hybrid, battery electric vehicles, and fuel cell electric vehicles, which are powered by hydrogen. So we live in a diverse world, and we need to offer diverse options to the consumers. And we believe that with this multi-approach, we will be able to set a different options for them as and continue reducing emissions as much as possible, as quick as possible. And of course, Mexico is key within this strategy. Our goals in Mexico are aligned with the global commitments. The proof is the expansion of our electrified lineup, and we will continue to expanding it. Currently, we have 10 electrified models available between Toyota and Lexus. So the commitment is there. We will continue moving forward in that way. But as Chris mentioned, there is a transition, and there is a need of enablers so that Mexico really can move forward to this electrification. And in that regard, I think that it's very important for Mexico to create public policy, again, holistic public policy for manufacturing purposes, to promote the production of electrified technologies, key components such as batteries or others that are going to play a key role within the new manufacturing world, and also public policy for the adoption of these new technologies in the market. Because we all know it's important to shape the market, and to shape it, it's necessary to provide incentives to the consumer, as has happened in the developed world, and also a roadmap, clear roadmap of how it's going to be developed, the infrastructure to charge those vehicles, and also the energy topic, where or what is the quality of the energy that is going to be powering those vehicles. So again, we are committed to carbon neutrality. Second, we need to focus that CO2 is the enemy and not the technologies, and that the markets are different, so there is a set of different options for the consumers in the world, and in Mexico in specific. And number three, again, the development of the comprehensive public policy to enable the transition to the electrification.
I think it's very well articulated. We see so clearly in Europe and the US that public policy at least kicks off this drive. The pace of electrification in Europe now is very fast, and the US is accelerating tremendously, not least on following some things like the Inflation Reduction Act. As I mentioned in my intro, Mexico can definitely benefit from that, because if you produce in Mexico, you will be able to get those incentives too. But to your point, with a lack of, or let's say, we still need a clearer public policy and roadmap here in Mexico to support that. I want to give the audience a chance. Is any questions or comments from the floor for our experts here? Obviously, we hope they'll also be around during the day for you to meet with them, but do we have any questions? No, you're going to leave that to me, that's fine. You don't get a... Just the warning will be you'll never get coffee or lunch earlier by not asking questions.
I think there's a question.
Oh, there is a question. Yeah. Okay, great. We have a question right here in the middle. And we'll ask you to just say your name and company. I think the mic isn't on, is it? Sorry again, Hazel, say it again. Sorry. Yeah, there we are.
Okay. Both speakers have been talking a lot, or you've both referenced the need for public policy for Mexican government to intervene to help make some of these changes. Are Nissan and Toyota already in dialogue with the Mexican authorities to kind of try to promote that, to guide that policy and that conversation?
Yes, of course. We always promote the conversation with government officials in all levels, federal and state, because we truly believe that the only way to achieve these objectives is working together and finding the solutions together. Another party that is key within this conversation is academia. And these working groups are formed or made up of government, industry, and academia, so that we can find and create the roadmap necessary for the creation and the implementation of the public policy in a successful manner.
Yeah, I would just comment the exact same response, actually. We are doing everything that Lizette mentioned, working closely with the government. We work closely with universities as well to try and keep forming the needs and identifying the needs, and then what support do we need to discuss that's needed, whether it's from us, from the government, from others, to really kind of keep pushing the needle a little bit. But it's going to take time. It's an evolution. But we interact with the government very regularly. Yeah.
And I think it needs to also be emphasized. What will be important in making that transition is working in partnership with this room as well, or this industry. We know electrification has impacts, whether it's the weights of vehicles that would impact on load capacity for distribution, infrastructure, as was mentioned, hazardous materials, conquerable, manageable issues if you work with the right sort of partners and plan things. So Mexico might not be at the moment of scaling this yet, but this will come. So this is an important point as well. Maybe one of the last key points I wanted to raise, Lizette, you mentioned it. You mentioned the importance of security in enabling your trade, enabling your growth in the supply chain. You also need to work with the government on that. Are there specific things your company is also doing to help mitigate some of these issues? Maybe Chris, I'll start with you in terms of logistics, supply chain, working with partners.
Yeah, I mean, the security is definitely a concern, and we've seen it, I would say, worsen over the past few years in certain parts of the country. So we are obviously trying to do things, working with our core carriers and other logistics partners on whether it's timing of dispatches, it's timing of when is that truck driver going to be on the road, when do we need to apply some additional protocol of security for a specific shipment. You know, we've seen a lot of our carriers put cameras inside and on their trucks so that, you know, they can monitor basically the safety of that individual. So that, and then obviously working with the government on the security issue as well. Very much really reinforcing the need for specific regions needing additional security and really trying to see if we can get that support. Yeah.
Anything you would add, Lizette, from Toyota?
I fully agree. To work jointly with our logistics partners and the different parties involved is crucial, and share best practices. Because we know that our carriers are investing a lot in improving their security. However, if we can share, I mean, among the industry, the situation to better understand the dimension and also what are the countermeasures that have worked better for one or other, I think it's got to be helpful and useful for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. Well, I think we've run out of time here in this discussion, but I hope you had a sense we've touched upon each of the strategic areas that we want to go into more detail across this event with our experts. But this has been a perfect way to start this event with two leaders from this. So I want to thank both of you so much for your time and input.
Thank you.